Dr. Henry stood at the edge of the crystalline forest on 442B and checked his instruments one more time. The readings showed normal atmospheric conditions, stable temperature, and no signs of dangerous fauna nearby. Behind him, his 8-year-old daughter skipped along the path, her small backpack bouncing with each step. She wore a blue survival suit that was too big for her, making her look even smaller against the towering crystal formations that rose around them like massive glass towers. Henry had brought on this expedition against the better judgment of the colony's administrator. Other scientists said he was foolish to bring his daughter to a frontier world. But Henry believed that needed to see her father's work to understand why he had brought their family across the stars to this distant planet. She had been homesick for Earth at first, but slowly she had begun to love 442B in her own way. The crystalline forest was beautiful in a way that Earth forests were not. The massive formations caught the light of the sun and broke it into 1,000 colors. It was like walking through a rainbow that had been frozen in place. Laughed as she touched one of the smaller crystals, watching how the light moved through it. "Papa, look how the light goes through the crystal. It's like magic," she said. Henry smiled. He loved seeing his daughter happy. "It is beautiful. The light bends as it passes through the crystal because of how the atoms are arranged. It is science, not magic. But science is like magic too, in its own way." They walked deeper into the forest, moving along a path that other researchers had marked with small, colored stones. Henry carried a scanner that tracked any movement larger than a small animal. The colony had explored this area many times, and nothing dangerous had ever been found here. The larger predators lived deeper in the forest, away from the human colony. Suddenly stopped walking. "Papa, do you hear that sound?" Henry paused. He did hear something. It was a low sound, like something heavy moving. It came from ahead of them down a slope that led into a deeper gorge. The scanner showed something, but the readings were unclear. Henry put his hand on his shoulder. "Stay close to me," he said. They moved forward carefully. The path became narrower, and the crystal formations rose higher on both sides of them. Then the ground dropped away suddenly, and they were looking down into a deep gorge. The sides of the gorge were steep, with sharp crystal edges jutting out at dangerous angles. The sound came again, and now it was clear. Something was moving down in the gorge, something large enough to move rocks. "Papa, I think something is hurt," said, and before Henry could stop her, she was stepping carefully down the slope into the gorge. "Wait, do not go down there alone," Henry called, but she was already moving down the steep path. He followed her, moving as quickly as he could without losing his footing on the loose rocks. The gorge was deeper than he had expected, and the light from the sun was growing weaker as they descended. The crystal walls seemed to close in on them. Then they heard a sound that made Henry's blood run cold. It was not an animal sound. It was not any sound he had heard before. It was a noise like metal scraping against stone, mixed with something that sounded like pain and anger. Stopped, she was standing at the edge of a small clearing in the gorge, and there in the clearing was a creature that Henry had never seen before. It was small, no more than a meter long, with a body shaped like a badger or a stoat. Its fur was black and white, with distinctive markings on its face and back. It had short, powerful legs and claws that looked sharp enough to cut through stone. But what caught Henry's attention was that the creature was trapped. A massive boulder had rolled down and pinned its back legs. The creature was trying to move, but the boulder was too heavy. The creature noticed and Henry standing at the edge of the clearing. It turned its head toward them, and Henry could see the intelligence in its eyes. This was not a simple animal. Those eyes held understanding, held fear, held something that looked like hope. Took a step forward. "Do not move," Henry said, his voice steady but firm. But had always been brave. She had always been kind. She walked slowly toward the creature, keeping her movements small and gentle. The creature watched her come, and its body relaxed slightly. It made a sound that was almost like a whimper. Knelt down beside the creature, staying far enough away that she would not startle it. "It is okay," she whispered. "We will help you." Henry came down beside them, his scanner ready to track any aggressive movement. But the creature made no move to attack. It watched with those intelligent eyes, and something passed between them. Some kind of understanding that needed no words. "Papa, it is stuck," said. "We have to move the rock." "This creature could be dangerous," Henry said. "No, it is not," replied with the certainty of childhood. "Look at its eyes, Papa. It is scared, not mean." Henry examined the creature more closely. He had never seen anything like it in any of the colony's databases. He took out his scanner and ran it over the creature. The readings showed a large brain, complex neural patterns, and a heartbeat that was racing with fear and pain. The creature was definitely in distress. "Okay," Henry said, "but we move carefully." Together, Henry and began moving the smaller rocks that surrounded the large boulder. The creature watched them work, and occasionally it made soft sounds, as if encouraging them. Talked to it as they worked, telling it that everything would be okay, that they were going to help it get free. After what felt like a long time, Henry managed to shift the large boulder enough that the creature could pull its back legs free. The creature limped forward, away from the boulder, its back legs shaking. It stood still for a moment, testing its weight on the injured legs. Then it looked at it. The creature moved toward her slowly. Henry tensed, ready to pull back. But the creature simply rubbed its head against a small hand and began to cry tears of happiness. The creature that had named Honey Badger now lived in a cave system less than 3 kilometers from the human colony. Visited it every day after her school lessons ended. She would take food in her small backpack, things she had convinced her father to give her. Fresh fruit from the colony gardens, dried meat from the supplies, and always a container of fresh water. Henry had reported the discovery to the colony's command, and Captain Lisa had authorized a limited research project. But there were conditions. Could observe the creature, but they had to maintain careful records. They had to monitor the creature's health and behavior. Most importantly, they had to be ready to stop if the creature showed any signs of aggression toward humans. So far, aggression was the one thing the honey badger had never shown. Sat outside the cave entrance on a warm afternoon, and the honey badger sat beside her close enough that their bodies were touching. She had brought fresh fruit, and the creature was eating it from her hand. Its intelligence was becoming more obvious with each passing day. It could open containers by itself now. It understood when said words like food, water, and hurt. Most remarkably, it had begun to imitate sounds that made. "Can you say hello?" asked, making the sound clearly and slowly. "Low." The creature's mouth opened, and it made a sound that was almost like the word had spoken. It was not perfect, but it was definitely an attempt at human speech. Clapped her hands with joy, and the honey badger made a chirping sound that had learned meant happiness. Henry watched from a distance, his scanner recording everything. The data was remarkable. The creature's brain scans showed neural complexity that matched or exceeded Earth's dolphins and apes. Its problem-solving abilities were impressive. Just yesterday, it had figured out how to open a locked container by studying how Henry had opened it, then copying his actions exactly. But what interested Henry the most was the creature's behavior toward. It did not show this kind of loyalty to anyone else. With Henry, it was cautious and polite. With the other researchers who came to observe, it was distant and wary. But with it was completely different. It followed her everywhere. It slept near her when she visited. It brought her stones and small pieces of food as if it was giving her gifts. One day, while was playing outside the cave, the honey badger suddenly became tense. Its body stiffened, and it made a sound that was different from any sound had ever heard it make. The sound was low and urgent, and it seemed to be a warning. Looked up. "What is wrong, honey badger?" The creature moved in front of her, positioning itself between and the direction it was looking. Its small body was rigid with tension. "Papa, something is wrong," called out to Henry, who was nearby taking measurements of the cave. Henry came running. His scanner showed nothing unusual in the immediate area, but the honey badger's behavior was clearly indicating a threat. The creature was vibrating with nervous energy, making that same low warning sound over and over. "We should go back to the settlement," Henry said, taking his hand. As they walked back toward the colony, the honey badger followed close behind them. It kept making that warning sound, and occasionally it would move to the side, as if checking something that humans could not see or hear. Henry realized that the creature was sensing something that their instruments could not detect. That night, a message came through the colony's communication system. A survey ship had been detected entering the system. The collective was the largest military power in this region of space. They had conquered 17 human colonies in the past 3 years. They did not negotiate with humans. They did not make peace. They simply came, they took what they wanted, and they moved on to the next world. Henry's heart sank. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the honey badger. He thought about the small colony on 442B, which had no military ships, no weapons, and no defense against a fleet. Captain Lisa called an emergency meeting of the colony's leadership. Henry attended with, thinking it was safer to keep her with him than to leave her in the settlement. The news was not good. "The ship is just a survey vessel," said, "but it means the collective is interested in our world. They are probably mapping our colony, learning our strength and weaknesses. A military force could follow within weeks or months." "What do we do?" asked Dr. Morgan, the lead biologist. "We prepare," said. "We build fortifications. We create evacuation plans. We hope they decide this colony is not worth conquering." But everyone in the room knew the truth. The collective did not need reasons to conquer a world. They took what they wanted because they could. That night, Henry found standing at her bedroom window, looking out at the stars. She was crying. "Will they come here?" she asked. "I do not know," Henry said, holding her. "If they do, the honey badger will protect us," said with certainty. "He will not let them hurt us." Henry did not have the heart to tell her that no single creature, no matter how intelligent, could protect anyone from a military force like the collective. Instead, he held his daughter and looked out at the stars, wondering what future was coming for them on this distant world. 3 days later, the honey badger showed something new. It led her away from its usual cave to a different part of the crystal formation, deeper and more hidden. It showed her a series of tunnels that wound through the rocks, passages that were clearly not natural but had been carved by patient hands over a long time. The passages went deep underground, far below the level of the human settlement. When told her father about the tunnels, Henry realized something important. The honey badger knew things about the land that no human had discovered. It knew the hidden places, the safe passages, the secret routes that wound through the very bones of the world. If they came, those tunnels might be the only way to survive. And the honey badger seemed to understand that. It seemed to be preparing for war, in the only way the collective's attack came without warning on a Tuesday morning when the sky was clear and blue. Was in her school classroom with 20 other children and their teacher, Fields. They were learning about Earth history when the power went out. The lights flickered once, twice, and then darkness filled the room. Children began to cry and quickly moved to the window to see what was happening. What she saw made her blood go cold. Ships. Massive warships descending through the atmosphere like metal mountains falling from the sky. Their hulls were black and gray, covered in weapons and engines that burned with terrible fire. They came down in formation, dozens of them blocking out the sun. The colony's alarm system began to sound. It was a wailing noise that everyone had trained for but hoped never to hear. It meant only one thing: attack, invasion, the end of the colony's peaceful existence. Grabbed and the other children. "We have to run," she said. "We have to get to the evacuation shelters now." But the children could not run fast enough. The streets of the colony filled with people trying to reach the landing zones where shuttles waited to take them off the planet. Henry had told that there were evacuation shuttles and emergency shelters, but he had never said which ones were good and which ones would not work. Ran with and the other children. The sound of weapons fire began, a constant thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Buildings exploded. People screamed. The colony that had taken 3 years to build was being destroyed in minutes. Henry was in his laboratory when the attack began. He was studying data from the honey badger's brain scans when his equipment went dead. He did not hesitate. He grabbed his emergency pack and ran toward the school where would be. The streets were chaos. Soldiers in heavy armor were moving through the colony, destroying everything in their path. They were not like humans. They were tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their weapons made sounds that burned the air itself. Henry avoided them, moving through the small streets and back alleys that he had learned over 3 years of living in the colony. When he reached the school, it was burning. The building had been hit by weapons fire and part of the roof had collapsed. Henry ran into the smoke, calling for, "Oh, where are you?" He found Fields with a group of children in the basement of the school. Was not with them. "Where is my daughter?" he demanded, fear making his voice harsh. "She was with us," said, her face covered in dust and blood. "But when the ceiling started to fall, I told her to go with the others toward the evacuation point. I do not know what happened to her." Henry did not wait to hear more. He ran back out into the smoke and fire. He searched every corner of the school building, calling his name over and over. Nothing. She was gone. Then he heard it, a sound like no animal on earth had ever made. It was a cry of rage and determination mixed together. It came from the direction of the medical facility about 2 blocks away. Henry ran toward the sound, his legs burning, his heart breaking with fear for his daughter. Had been separated from the others when the ceiling came down. She had fallen through rubble and dust, landing in a small space beneath a collapsed wall. She was trapped, unable to move her legs, unable to call for help because the debris covered her mouth and nose. But then she heard it, a sound that she knew better than any voice in the world, a familiar chirp, a pattern of noises that meant only one thing: Honey Badger was here. Tried to move, tried to make any sound to let the creature know where she was. Her lips formed words even though no sound came out. Here, I am here. The Honey Badger heard her. The creature had been moving through the chaos of the invasion, dodging patrols, following an instinct that was stronger than fear. It had followed scent across the colony, over the blood and smoke and terrible sounds of invasion. Now it stood above the pile of rubble that buried its small friend. The Honey Badger began to move rocks. Piece by piece, the creature lifted and pushed and pulled at the debris. Its small claws dug into the stone and metal. Its muscles, stronger than any animal its size should possess, worked with desperate purpose. A soldier noticed the creature and moved toward it, weapon raised. The Honey Badger made a sound that was pure rage and fury. It charged at the soldier, moving faster than something so small should be able to move. The soldier tried to shoot, but the creature was too quick, too unpredictable. The Honey Badger's claws found the joints in the soldier's armor, the places where the protection was weakest. The soldier fell. The Honey Badger did not stop to celebrate. It returned to the rubble too and continued moving rocks. Henry heard the sound of the explosion just before he reached the medical facility. An orbital strike had hit nearby, and the shock wave knocked him down. When he got back to his feet, he could see the Honey Badger, dust-covered and bleeding, still moving rocks with desperate determination. Henry screamed, running toward the rubble. "Papa," small voice came from beneath the rocks. "Papa, I am here." Henry and the Honey Badger worked together then, human and alien creature united by love for one small girl. They moved rocks. They pulled at twisted metal. They dug deeper and deeper into the rubble. Finally emerged, covered in dust, bleeding from small cuts but alive. Henry grabbed her, and the Honey Badger did not run in panic. It ran with purpose, with direction, with absolute knowledge of where it was going. Henry held his hand and followed the small black and white creature as it led them away from the burning colony, away from the sound of weapons fire, toward the crystalline forest. Henry's mind was working even in the chaos of escape. The caves had told him about the caves. The Honey Badger knew those caves. The creature had spent its whole life in those tunnels, moving through passages that no soldier could understand or navigate. They reached the edge of the colony where the buildings gave way to the crystal formations. The Honey Badger did not stop to check if anyone was following. It simply moved forward, diving between 2 massive crystal towers that only something small could pass through easily. Henry had to pull through, their survival suits scraping against the sharp edges. Behind them, they could hear voices and the sounds of pursuit. The aliens were following, but they were not familiar with this terrain. They were soldiers designed to fight on open ground, in cities and settlements, not in the maze of crystal formations that made up the forest. The Honey Badger led them deeper and deeper into the crystal maze. They climbed over rocks, squeezed through narrow passages, and descended into places where the sun did not reach. The creature moved with absolute confidence, never hesitating, never choosing the wrong path. Then they came to the cave entrance that knew so well. But the Honey Badger did not stop here. It made a sound, a long call that echoed through the caves, and then it pressed forward into the darkness. Henry turned on his scanner, using its small light to see the way. The passage opened up, becoming a tunnel that went deeper underground. This was one of the passages that had described, one of the secret routes that the Honey Badger had shown to her. They ran through the darkness, the Honey Badger always ahead, always knowing the way. Other creatures began to appear in the tunnels. More Honey Badgers moving through the darkness with grace and confidence. There were dozens of them, perhaps more than 100, moving as a group through the underground passages. Henry realized then what he was seeing. The Honey Badgers were not solitary creatures. They lived in family groups, in tribes, in complex communities hidden below the surface of 442B. The creature that had rescued was not an individual making decisions alone. It was calling its entire family to action. The ground above them shook. Orbital fire was hitting the planet. Henry could hear the thunder of it, feel the vibration through his feet. The crystal passages around them were strong, made of stone that could withstand the violence of invasion. They ran for what felt like hours. Behind them, they could still hear the sounds of pursuit, but the sounds were growing fainter. The aliens could not navigate these passages. They could not move through the darkness as the honey badgers could. They were getting lost, trapped in the maze of stone. Finally, the passage opened into a massive cavern. Henry stepped out and saw what he had come to understand as a gathering place. The floor was smooth and flat. The walls were covered in carvings, deep marks that looked like the honey badgers had spent generations marking these stones. There were water sources and food stores and places where the creatures clearly lived and sheltered. Other colonists were here. Henry was shocked to see them. At least 200 people, maybe more, had found their way to these underground shelters. Many of them were children. They had escaped the invasion by following the same paths that the honey badgers had shown them, or by being led by the creatures themselves. A man with a burned uniform approached Henry. His name was Captain Martin Edwards, and he had been leading the colony's defense forces. Edwards said, relief clear in his voice, "I thought you were dead. We saw the school collapse. How did you get here?" Henry pointed to the honey badger, who was now surrounded by other creatures of its kind. Was holding the creature's paw, and the honey badger was making soft sounds, communicating with its family. "The creature," Henry said, "Screecher, it led us here, it is. They are a sentient species. They have been living in these caves for who knows how long, and they are helping us." Edwards looked at the creatures with new understanding. "How many are there?" "I do not know," Henry said, "but they know these passages, they know how to survive here, and they are keeping us alive." The thunder of weapons fire continued above them, but here in the deep caves, they were safe. The weapons could not reach this far underground. The invaders could not navigate the passages. They were trapped on the surface while the humans and their honey badger allies were hidden in the earth. But Henry knew that safety was not enough. They could hide here for a while, but eventually they would destroy the colony completely. They would tear apart every building, search every corner of the planet. They would keep searching until they found the humans. Unless something changed, unless someone helped them. And then Henry understood what the honey badgers were doing. They were not just leading people to safety. They were doing something else, something that required leaving the shelter of the caves. The honey badger that was with made a sound, a command that echoed through the cavern. 3 of the creatures stood up. One of them was larger than the others, more with the look of a leader. This was the one that made the decision. The 3 creatures moved toward one of the cave passages, a tunnel that led not deeper into the earth, but upward toward the surface. Grabbed the honey badger's paw. "Where are you going?" The creature made a soft sound and touched its head to his forehead. Henry understood. This was goodbye. The creature was going to do something that would keep the rest of them safe, something that would require leaving the shelter. "No," said, tears streaming down her face. "No, you cannot go. You will be hurt. You will be killed." What happened in the caves above them became clear only later, when the survivors had time to understand the data. The 3 honey badgers had attacked the command center. They had moved through passages that the soldiers did not even know existed. They had accessed the main communication array and destroyed it, a piece of technology that they relied on to coordinate their forces across the entire invasion. The intelligent creatures had studied the technology long enough to understand what needed to be broken. They had sacrificed themselves doing it, attacking with complete knowledge that they could not survive the encounter. But their sacrifice bought time. It bought precious hours while the forces on the ground were cut off from their command ship in orbit. It bought just enough time for what happened next. The human defense fleet arrived. Ships appeared in the sky above 442B, human military vessels that had been stationed at a nearby base. They were not as large as the ships, not as powerful. But they came prepared for war, and the collective, for the first time in this invasion, found themselves facing an organized resistance. The battle in space lasted for 6 hours. It was fierce and terrible and magnificent. By the time it was over, 3 warships had been destroyed or crippled, and the rest of the invasion fleet had been forced to retreat. They jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled the system, abandoning the ground forces they had left behind. The ground soldiers, cut off from their command and facing human defenders who now controlled the skis, began to surrender. The invasion of 442B had failed. The colony would live. But Henry did not hear this news right away. He was still in the deep caves, holding his daughter as she cried for the creature that had saved her life. It took 3 days for the rescue teams to find them. 3 days of waiting in the darkness, underground with 200 other survivors, wondering if the battle above had been won or lost. When the rescue teams finally arrived, they brought news of victory. They had been defeated. The colony would be rebuilt. Humanity would survive on 442b. But could only cry because her friend had died to make that survival possible. Henry tried to comfort her. He explained that the honey badger was a hero, that its actions had saved not just, but everyone in the caves, everyone on the colony. He told her that the creature's sacrifice would be remembered forever. But was only 8 years old, and understanding about heroism and sacrifice did not make her feel better about losing something she loved. The survivors emerged from the caves slowly, moving up toward the surface and the light of day. Henry carried on his shoulders because she was too sad to walk on her own. Around them, other colonists moved upward, toward the destroyed settlement, toward the work of rebuilding. When they reached the surface, they found the colony in ruins. Buildings were burning. The landscape was by weapons fire. This place that had taken 3 years to build would now take years more to restore. Henry sat down on a piece of debris and tried to find somewhere to rest, but suddenly pulled at his hand. "Papa, look," she said, pointing at the crystal formations in the distance. A movement, a shape, black and white stripes in the sunlight. Henry's heart stopped. It could not be. But it was. The honey badger came walking slowly through the crystal formations, limping badly, its fur burned and bloodied but alive. It was moving toward them with purpose, despite obvious pain from its injuries. Screamed with joy and ran toward the creature. Henry ran after her, ready to catch her if the creature was not what he hoped it was. But when reached the honey badger, the creature simply collapsed on the ground beside her. Held the creature in her arms, tears of happiness streaming down her face. The honey badger was alive. It was wounded badly, but it was alive. "Do not die," whispered to the creature. "Please do not die, I need you." Henry kneeled beside them and ran a medical scanner over the honey badger. The creature's injuries were severe, but there was hope. It was alive, and with proper care it might survive. The news spread through the colony quickly. The creature that had saved them, the intelligent being that had coordinated the escape and attack, it had survived the invasion. Some people said it was impossible. They said the honey badger should have been killed 10 times over. But it had kept moving, kept fighting, kept pushing forward because it needed to return to the girl it loved. In the days that followed, the honey badger became the symbol of the colony's survival. Henry worked constantly to treat its injuries, using every medical skill he had learned. Sat beside the creature and talked to it, telling it stories and feeding it the fresh fruit from the colony gardens. Slowly, the honey badger began to heal. Its burns started to fade. Its strength returned. Within 3 weeks, it was able to walk on its own again. The collective learned a lesson that day, a lesson that would spread through the galaxy. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not easy to conquer. Humanity had allies in the most unexpected places. Humanity had the ability to inspire loyalty and courage even in creatures that came from other worlds, other minds, other ways of being. And sometimes, the smallest creature, driven by love for a small girl, could change the fate of an entire colony. Henry made a full report to the colonial authority, documenting everything that had happened. He classified the honey badgers as a sentient species. He recommended that no human weapon ever be pointed at them. He made it clear that they were intelligent beings with their own families, their own communities, their own right to exist. Never went back to being a normal colonist. Instead, she became the official liaison between the human colony and the honey badger community. She learned more of their language. She helped the two species understand each other. She proved that humans were not conquerors, not destroyers, but could be partners with the intelligent beings who shared their world. The honey badger stayed with her always, never leaving her side. It followed her to school and to work. It slept beside her bed at night. The bond between them became a symbol of something new on 442b, something that had never existed before. It was the bond between two different species, united by love and loyalty, proving that even in a galaxy full of darkness and war, there was still room for kindness and connection. And that made all the difference. The honey badger made the soft, purring sound that meant love. Then it turned and moved toward the tunnel, toward the surface, toward the forces that waited above. Henry held as she cried, knowing that the creature was doing the same thing Henry had always known he might have to do. It was going to sacrifice itself to protect its family. It was going to sacrifice itself to protect the girl it loved more than its own life. Held her tight, tears streaming down his face. The honey badger made a soft sound and reached down to touch the creature's head. "Thank you," she whispered. But there was no time for gratitude. Around them, the forces continued to advance. More soldiers were coming, more weapons fire. They were surrounded by the chaos of invasion with no safe place to run. Then the honey badger made a sound that was different. A call, a summons. And to Henry's amazement, the creature began moving not toward the evacuation shuttles, but toward the crystalline forest, toward the hidden caves that had discovered just days before. Why, a creature like it could. It was preparing to protect no matter what came. "It is okay now," she whispered. "You are safe now." The creature made a soft sound that almost sounded like purring and settled down beside, its body touching hers. The small black and white creature and the small human girl sat together in the gorge, and Henry knew that something important had just happened. Something that would change everything.